On this week's podcast, I'm talking with Tracey Sullivan about Reiki and Catholicism. This idea was born in 2017 when Reiki guided me to begin writing a book about the various religions in the world peace grids, and to help us understand that we're not so different, that regardless of the religion that we follow, we're not so different. In fact, the book is it may still be written, I don't know. It may be written as a result of doing these podcasts. And the book is called All Roads Lead Home. And I was shown that regardless of how we connect with Source, regardless of what way, we're all working to connect with Source. We're all doing the same thing, regardless of the name that we call God or Source or Jehovah or Allah. We're all working toward the same thing. And at our core, we're all love. So I'm really excited about this series where we're talking about Reiki and religions. And thank you, Tracey, for agreeing to come to and talk with us about Catholicism today.
Thanks for having me, Pam.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I'd just like to let you know what we have going on here. There are online classes in an Asian and European friendly time zone, Reiki level 1 and 2 and Masters, which qualify you toward professional membership in the Reiki Membership Association. Those are happening in July, the middle of July. Starting the 16th, and those classes are an extra day has been added to each class. They're a little shorter day, so they begin very early in the morning in North America, they're evening in Asia, and morning in Europe. So it makes it accessible for our European and Asian students. And following that, July 23rd is an Animal Reiki Level 1 and 2 class on the beautiful Campobello Island, which will be followed by, on the 25th, a whale tour where we'll actually go out onto the ocean and see if we can spot some whales. We should be able to that time of year. And regardless, I'm sure that we'll see seals and possibly even some rare puffins and razorbills and lots of other, and porpoises and sometimes even great white sharks. So I'm sure we'll see all of that from the boat. And then that's followed by a master class. And again, the master class will be going out on the 25th as well to do the whale tour because they'll already have their level 1 and 2 Reiki. In August, I have a Karuna Reiki class, an animal communication class in an Australian friendly time zone, which is actually evenings in North America, very early mornings in Asia, and early mornings in Australia. So join us for those if you would like as well. And then in October, I have a full lineup of hybrid classes here at the farm. I should mention the Campobello whale class is in person, but as the class isn't full yet, if you really wanted to join online, let us know. And anybody who attends the Campobello whale class, I'll be making a donation for each student to the whale rescue group that exists in Campobello that goes out and gets whales untangled from fishing lines and so on, and does their best to monitor the whales and try to help keep them healthy and alive. If you don't already get our newsletter, there's a link to it in the podcast. And if you haven't yet picked up a copy of the Reiki business book, I've put a link to the Amazon.ca and .com in our podcast so that you can get that on order either in hard copy or as an ebook. Tracey, what about you? What have you got coming up this summer?
So in July, the middle of July, the 16th and 17th, I believe, I'm teaching a Reiki 1 and 2, which is in person only, and that's in Cape May, New Jersey. And then in August, I'm teaching a master class, which is a weekday class, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I can't really think of the dates at the moment, but it's also in the middle of the month of August.
Right.
And then the following weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm teaching a Karuna Reiki masterclass. And then in September, I'm teaching Animal Reiki Master. And then in October, I have a in-person and online Reiki 1 and 2 class. So the master classes in August will be in person and online.
Yes.
And the Animal Reiki will also be in person and online. So that's my schedule for up through October.
I love it. I love it. And before we go too much further, I'm just going to invite everybody to join me in a brief invocation and activate your Reiki energy so that you're listening through the filters of Reiki today. So I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes and bring your hands together at your heart space in Gasho. And just breathe in the Reiki energy that surrounds you. Inviting your symbols to join you, however you do that. And breathe. Many of you listening probably have a background in Catholicism or know someone who does. It's a very prevalent religion in our culture. And it has a very interesting history. And sometimes we feel that religion and Reiki don't go together, but nothing could be further from the truth, regardless of the religion that you work within or define yourself from. Reiki can enhance your experience with that religion. And today we're talking about Christianity and the Catholicism branch, or the Catholic branch of Christianity in particular. We invite the Reiki energy to just open our ears to hear, our eyes to see, and just open our chakras and all of the parts of us so that we can listen with an open heart and an open mind, learning from each other's perspectives in this series and understanding that regardless of the religious or spiritual tradition we follow, we are all one, and all roads do lead home and to God or Allah or Jehovah. Spirit, source, whatever name, universal energy, whatever name you decide to use, we are all one. And just feeling the energy and the light of unity flowing through us and the oneness. We open our heart, open to hear the perceptions and perspectives of others. Thank you for being here with us today. Aho and namaste.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Tracey, I was always jealous. I was raised Protestant, and I was always a little bit jealous of Catholics growing up because there were so many really neat traditions. And one of the traditions in particular that I was jealous of is you guys got to go to confession. You could do things wrong and then you were done after you confessed them. As a Protestant, I had to hold that guilt for the rest of my life. And I always felt that I also appreciated that you could go to church on Saturday evening and sleep in on Sunday morning. And I was a Sunday school teacher, so I had to be there at 9:30 teaching. But aside from my jealousy, can you tell us a little bit about your history and what it was like growing up within the Catholic religion?
Sure. So probably when talking about the Catholic religion, it's best to start with the church. So the church is considered the original Christian church. So people that practice the Catholic religion, their belief is that the original Christian church is the Catholic Church. And that began with Jesus himself. And so Jesus, as most people know, had his apostles, and one of them was Peter. So Jesus said to Peter, and this is a quote, his quote, "You are the rock on which I build my church. The gates of that will not prevail against it." so the gates of hell will not prevail against it. That was the start of the Catholic Church. So Peter was who was one of Jesus's apostles, was the first pope, considered the first pope of the Catholic Church. And there has been a pope guiding the Catholic Church, the head of the Catholic Church, ever since then, ever since Jesus bestowed that on his apostle Peter. So that part I've always thought was like really interesting and just like nice to have that direct connection to Jesus. So what that means for what it means for a Catholic person to live as a Catholic is to be a disciple of Jesus, because what he asked the apostles, his original disciples, to do is to go out and preach to people and make everybody a disciple. So that is every single person that with ears to hear. So the basic elements of that would be prayer, number one, going to church, spending time in the community, being involved in your church, doing volunteer work, or maybe like you did, Pam, teaching Sunday school. In the Catholic Church, it's catechism. So anybody that was a Catholic, grew up Catholic and went to a public school, they probably had to go to catechism once a week. So that's like a huge part of the Catholic religion, is the teaching of the Catholic teachings. And the other part of that is service in the name of the Catholic Church or religion, service to your fellow mankind. There's some basic distinctions about the Catholic Church that kind of make it different from maybe Protestant and obviously other religions as well. And one is the Bible. The church, their teachings are based on the Bible, but not only the Bible, but the Catholic Church as well. So I know in Protestant, their teachings are based solely on the Bible and not on the church or the clergy in the church, but it is solely based on the Bible, where the Catholic Church, the teachings come from both the church and the Bible. And the church itself, so the Catholic Church is considered to be all-inclusive, and actually that I believe that the name Catholic means that, universal or all-inclusive of everyone, and it is one church. And it goes back to that story I told, about Jesus and Peter. It goes back to that. That's the origination of it. It's one church, where other churches may have a lot of different denominations. The Catholic Church,
That's true.
is one. So another distinction for the Catholic Church would be that you have the Pope, then you have bishops under the Pope, then you have priests, and then you have clergymen, and only men can fulfill these functions still to this day. So that's still a distinction of the Catholic Church. And let's see, I wrote down a couple of other. So you have the sacraments, and that's probably the biggest thing. And probably most people have heard of the sacraments, the 7 sacraments that are associated with the Catholic religion. So you have baptism, that most people have heard of. And the word baptism, the Greek version of baptism, means dipping. So if you're not familiar with baptism, it has to do with water, and it's holy water. So it's either dripped over the forehead. Usually, a lot of times in the Catholic religion, it's like a baby that's being baptized, but anybody of any age can be baptized. And then there's also a fully immersion into the water. And then there's confirmation. So with baptism, what that is doing is it's cleansing that person of all sin, including original sin. So original sin, I don't know if that is unique to the Catholic Church, but it definitely is of the Catholic Church, and cleanses the person who's being baptized from that original sin and all other sin. And then there's confirmation, and that strengthens the Holy Spirit within the person, so they can then be better able to share the teachings with other people. And from confirmation, you have the Holy Communion. And usually I went to a Catholic church, so we received Holy Communion before the confirmation. That's out of order. And that's like
Confirmation is usually when you're a little older and can make your own decisions, right?
Yes. So, and typically in a Catholic school or in the Catholic tradition, it's like around 8th grade. So, however, I'm remembering that from when I was in Catholic school. So, making my first communion in 2nd grade and then my confirmation in 8th grade. So the Holy Communion is the host, which is bread and wine. So it's the bread, the body and blood of Christ is what the Holy Communion is. Eucharist, it's called also. And then reconciliation, and you've already talked about that. Confession.
Yes. Okay, that's what that is. Okay.
Yes. So it's funny that you were saying that you were jealous of that with the Catholic religion, where it was for me, it was like I dreaded going.
I looked at you guys and you could go confess and then you were guilt free after that. I had to live with guilt the rest of my life.
Yeah, but you felt so guilty going in there and telling the priest what you did.
And my husband is Catholic and he said that they were little kids and they would make up stuff.
Yes, yes, yes. And
it wasn't respectful to my mother.
Yes, exactly. So it was, I remember going into, it was dark. You really couldn't see. There's like that screen. So you couldn't really see each other in my church. And you had to say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." And then I disrespected my mother, or I lied, or I didn't do my homework, or whatever. You were just like a little kid and didn't really understand the whole point of it. I think in actuality, in reality, like the essence of that is a real important thing for people. And I think if it was taught in a different way, it might really help people. But in that, and I'm sure that it does help a lot of people. I'm not saying that it doesn't help a lot of people, but at that age and in the beginning, when you're first learning about it, I think the essence of it is truly something that is very beneficial. So then the anointing of the sick, that's a sacrament in which the ill are anointed and given spiritual strength. And then
is that like last rites? I've heard of last,
but they don't call it last rites anymore.
Okay.
And my mother explained this to me, because my mother used to go to, she volunteered, she was a very devout Catholic. She volunteered going to hospitals, giving communion and doing something with the anointing of the sick. I'm not sure like exactly what she did, but she did tell me that they don't call it last. And then the last couple or marriage is like the 6th one. And I think everybody understands what that is, but really the origin of it, the essence of that is the marriage between the love that exists between Christ and the church. So a marriage of a man and a woman in the Catholic Church is a replicated after that. That's the symbolism of it. And then the last one is the holy orders. And that's when somebody can become a priest or a clergyman or a bishop. So that's the holy order. So those are like the 7 sacraments. And that is like something that is really, I think, distinguishes the Catholic religion from most other religions. Do you want me to continue on with?
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit about your traditions and some of the things, what it was like growing up Catholic.
Yeah, I did go to a Catholic church. So the tradition in a Catholic school. So we went to church on a regular basis. So traditionally, though, we would go to church on Sunday, and I had to always be seen at church. I would go into the back door and stand like in the entryway until my mother saw me, and then I would take off.
So you just had to be seen. You didn't have to stay?
I was supposed to, but I did. So I have to say that growing up, I did grow up in a very devout Catholic household, but I myself was not as devout as my mother and the Catholic school would have liked. But I think that was the case with a lot of people.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess some of the traditions besides the 7 sacraments, which are really the pillars of the Catholic Church, I would say, is that we would celebrate. So the holidays that they celebrate, you would think that Easter would be one of them, but it's actually considered a holy day. and not a holiday. Christmas is the birth of Christ. So of course, we celebrated that as a Catholic holiday. And then there were some other holy days that are various dates throughout the year. I think there's four main ones that probably most people haven't heard of, like the Assumption and some other, I don't know that much about those though, Pam.
Okay. Now,
Uh,
did you do some of the traditional things like only Fridays, only eating fish and things like that, or?
oh, yeah, yeah. So on Fridays, we did not eat meat. And that actually, I believe, ended where I believe that you can, I could be mistaken about this, but I believe that may not be the case anymore
Okay.
in some circumstances anyways in my household, and most of the stuff that I remember I've learned from my mother. Yeah. And as far as like traditions, that's really basically the traditions of the Catholic Church, or I can't really think of any other ones that we practiced besides what we just talked about. Did you
Right.
have any others that come to mind for you?
No, actually, I guess Easter and Christmas were very big in the Protestant religion as well.
Hmm.
And so I just, yeah, I was wondering, and I know, so you talked about confirmation, which is the coming of age
Hmm.
ceremony and this sort of thing. And so, no, that's really neat. Now, do you still follow Catholicism, Tracy? Or are you not as much?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I haven't been to church in a while. No, they say in the Catholic Church, once you're a Catholic, you're always a Catholic. So you're always
Right.
welcomed back. So I know I've always felt that it's where I came from. And I have related a lot of things that I believe now back to the beliefs as I understand them now as an adult.
Right.
So I really have a lot more respect for the Catholic religion now than I did when I was a child, because I have a deeper understanding
Right.
of what the essence of it is. I think it's just lost on people many times for whatever reason, the essence of the teachings.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because it's so regimented, and I'm not sure why, but as an adult, I look back and I can see the beauty of it, really.
And do you think that Reiki helped with that? Because I know that it did for me. I know I had to step away
Absolutely.
from the church for a while, and Reiki brought me back to an appreciation of it again. And which is interesting because some people worry, like, how do you find Reiki and Catholicism have gone together for you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think that when I started my Reiki practice, a lot of things within me changed, like my ideas about things and my acceptance of things and just my knowledge, like inner knowledge of
Yes.
things became more clear. So I didn't realize it when I was growing up, but now I understand how much strength that the Catholic religion gave to my mother.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that actually affected me too growing up is because it made her who she was. She was a single mom with five kids, and we were all pretty close in age. And it
Wow.
couldn't have been easy for her. I know it wasn't, but she had this inner calmness and inner strength that now I know was because of her devout religion, being in the Catholic religion. So it made her who she was. She never tried to force this religion on us. We were required to go to church, but I went because I wanted to like please her. Some of my siblings wouldn't always go there. And even as adults, when we started having children, me and my siblings, my mother would suggest things like, oh, it would give them something to believe in if they were went to made their first communion and did all of the things that we talked about, all the sacraments. But she was still open and kind and didn't try to force anything on us. So I think that made a huge impact on me too, just her.
Right.
And that made me more open to it as an adult, because I never had it in my head, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get away from this. It just was there all the time. as like this gentle energy, that this is how I see it now. And again, I didn't realize I was very fortunate to grow up surrounded by that energy.
Yeah.
And even the fact that I went to a Catholic school, and it meant like everything was very rigid and a lot of conformity. But again, I look back now and I can feel like the faith of the nuns and the priests. Like I remember like Sister Frederica sitting in the back of the church when we were in like, I was in grade school. And after church, we would go back to the classroom, and she would talk about the nun would talk about like having been in church. And one time she asked the class, can you, when you're sitting there, can you, no, she told us that when she sits in the back of the church, she sits back there and she can feel the presence of Jesus. And at the time we were like, oh, yeah, okay. And we probably chuckled at her. But she just, now I look back at her and I can still picture her and I understand what she's saying now. I went to midnight mass with my mother once when she came to visit me in Connecticut. And this is after I had taken my first Reiki class, but I hadn't really talked to her about it very much because I was like concerned about what she might think about it. So we didn't really talk about it that much. But I'm sitting in midnight mass with her. It was just her and I. Nobody else wanted to come. Go figure. We're sitting there and I'm just half listening. I'm just kind of looking around, daydreaming a little bit, sitting next to my mother. And something the priest said just stood out to me. Instead of saying Holy Ghost, he said Holy Spirit. So around that time, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, that's a guess, they stopped saying Holy Ghost and it became Holy Spirit. So that really stuck out to me. So I leaned over and I said to my mother, did he say spirit? Because my mother was always like, oh, you don't know spirit. There's only one spirit. It's Jesus. And the use of the word spirit was somehow like not something that you weren't supposed to do. So that's why when I heard it in the church, I was like, he said spirit, Mom. And she said, yeah, they changed that. And right when she said that, I looked up in the Catholic Church, there's like a crucifix with Jesus on it in most Catholic churches, and it's huge. When she said that, I was like, oh, I just sat back and I looked up at the crucifix with Jesus on it. And I immediately thought of those nuns and how they said that they felt the presence of Jesus in the church, because that's what I felt on that day in the church for the first time. So I experienced what they felt and what my mother had felt all those years. And I believe it was my connection to Reiki that had opened me up to have this experience that I had with my mother that day in the church. So my experience with Reiki, it gave me like a platform maybe to be able to understand that deep essence of the practice that I think so often is not felt. So that was a really good experience for me with my mother.
And what did your mom think when you did open up to her about doing Reiki? Was she accepting of it?
She at first just didn't really say too much about it. She didn't say anything negative about it. I think that she saw that it was helping me. And so I learned that her good friend Doris was somebody who received Reiki sessions. So after I had been practicing for, I don't know, a few years, I was talking to her friend Doris, and I was going to be in the Albany area. That's where I grew up, and that's where my mom still lived. So I was going to be there, and I asked her if she wanted me to come over and give her a Reiki session. So she said, yes, of course. So it was Doris and Doris's husband and my mother and my brother Jeffrey were all in Doris's like little house, and she's playing this music that she created. It's the CD that her and her husband's brother, they sang in their church. So we're listening to this that they play in their church, and I'm like giving everybody Reiki. And my mother is sitting on the couch And she's just sitting there. I wasn't sure what she was thinking. I was just like leaving it to Reiki or Jesus to help her with whatever struggle she might be having. So I gave Doris Reiki and then her husband. And then we took a break, and my mother came over to me and we were chatting. And she said to me, and it just like really is, it chokes me up every time I think about it. She said to me, that is the first time, and she's 80 years old at this time. And been a devout Catholic since she was like in the womb. So she said that this was the first time that she has felt the same spirit that she feels in the church outside of the church. And that was a turning point for my mother, because she began to, and then I gave her a Reiki session. And then after that, I gave her many Reiki sessions. It really, I think, was a real huge healing for my mother on so many different levels. So my mother and I had this real interesting experience of me experiencing that in the church on that Christmas Eve midnight mass. And my mother, years later, experiencing the opposite thing in her friend's house as I was giving everybody Reiki. So to me, that is the essence of the two things coming together. It has nothing to do with anything that you're going to say to somebody. It is all in waiting and allowing the process to unfold naturally. And it will unfold naturally if you allow it to. Yeah, so that was my most profound experience with connecting Reiki with a religion. So I just have so much more respect for the religion now. Even though I don't practice it, I understand why people are devout, and because they're feeling this thing that I failed to feel within that container. But I did attain that through the practice of Reiki, and then was able to transfer that and
into the
see and understand, have a better understanding, if that makes sense.
beautiful, Tracy. And I think in each of these sessions, I wind up talking about this pie chart that I saw through through a Hay House, something that I was doing. And it's just a pie chart, a circle with it looks like a pie cut in many slices. And what they said was that when you're just learning a religion or a spiritual tradition, you're on the outside of the pie chart, and you're working your way in, and you think, I'm very different because I'm this piece of pie. I'm Catholicism, and that's Reiki, or that's Buddhism, or Protestantism, or Islam. But once you get to the center, you realize that it's all the same, and that it might be a different way of getting there. And Munikai, when I was talking with him about Islam, said it's like you and I agree to go to a stadium and meet each other at a stadium, but I'm coming through twisty, turny mountain trails because that's where I live, and you're coming from the flat plains and going up to get there. And so we've had a very different route, but we still get to the same place and we can meet each other. And I remember I love your story. I think that's absolutely beautiful. You make me think of a conversation I had with William Rand. And William was raised in a very devout evangelical family, and his sister continued on that route, whereas William, as we know, went more towards spiritualism and eventually found Reiki and took that all the way. And he said initially he and his sister butted heads and didn't have a lot in common. But the further that they both continued on their paths, they met. And he said, now we can have conversations and we get each other. We understand each other. We may have different language to describe, but we really understand each other now. And that's what you're saying to me. And I love that. I think that's just because sometimes I have noticed that sometimes people who follow a specific religion feel that Reiki is the opposite or the anti or against the religion, and nothing could be further from the truth. Reiki isn't a religion, and it enhances the experience with any religion that you follow. But let's talk for a minute about the bishop's letter. There was a letter that was written within the confines of Catholicism that kind of was against Reiki, or wasn't pro Reiki, that's for sure. And I know that I was in a class once with a student who was raised with a very devout Catholic family, and her father was very devout and was very concerned about her doing Reiki because he felt that it was not, that it was a cult, or that it was not in accordance with Catholicism. And you and I know that it's in accordance with every religion, but when you don't understand it, maybe that you can come to a different conclusion. And I always thought that this was a generally held, this letter from the bishops was a generally held attitude among the clergy. And I discovered that it wasn't. My children are baptized Catholic, and we had to have a Catholic priest at our wedding in order to bless the ceremony and please my in-laws. And I was raised in a family that used to say, don't marry a French boy, don't marry a Catholic boy. And my husband's family used to say, don't marry an English girl, don't marry a Protestant girl. There was all this conflict between French and English, and between Protestant and Catholicism. And we had made a decision to get married Anglican, which we felt was partway in the middle. But in order to please my husband's parents, we also had a Catholic priest there. So and we used to attend the Catholic church, and I loved the ceremony, the traditions. I loved that priest in particular. Father Monty Peters, he's just an incredible human being, and he's the one who blessed our marriage and welcomed me, even though I wasn't Catholic, and never became Catholic. I just attended. But I ran into him at a blood donor clinic, and he said, what are you doing now, Pam? Because he had moved to a different church and we had moved away. And I told him, well, I don't know if your Pope would like it. I said, I'm doing Reiki. I'm a Reiki master and practitioner. And I'll never forget, because he said, I didn't tell him that I was Reiki. I just said, I don't know if your Pope would like it. And he says, oh, he doesn't like a lot of things. What are you doing? And I told him, and he just said, oh, that's fantastic. He didn't have a problem with it at all. And it was later that I discovered that, in fact, this letter was just a handful of bishops who wrote it. Tell us a little bit about that bishop's letter.
Yeah, I think that the gist of it is that the Catholic Church is saying that there's two ways that a person can heal, and that's through the grace of God, and that's praying, comes directly from God. And then the other is through allopathic medicine, and it needs to be like science-based.
Right.
So in the letter, what they were saying about Reiki and other holistic modalities, but about Reiki in particular, is that it is coming through, like the person somehow has control over the energy. So it's not something that's coming directly from God. And the other thing is that they were saying that it has not been proven by science that this energy field exists. Those were the two main things that I got from that. And then the other thing was that the idea of the practice was somehow came from the religion, Buddhism. And I think that came from the fact that historically, there has been some inaccurate information about Reiki put out there until the 1990s, when people like Frank William Rand and other people as well continued to do research and found out the facts. And Reiki is not based in religion whatsoever. And William wrote an article that is in rebuttal to what the bishops wrote. And he explains very clearly and beautifully, as we would expect with William.
Well, as William does.
Yes. And that he put it out very clearly about the inaccuracy of the history. And if they had researched a little bit deeper, they would have found the facts that Reiki is not associated with any religion. And we know, Pam, and anybody that does Reiki knows that we don't have any control over this. when we
It
think
just
we do.
flows through.
Yes, and we teach to understand that you don't have any control over this. And when you can actually step out of the whole thing, it's flowing better.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's supposed to be. We are not supposed to be a part of this and in control of it.
People sometimes tell me you're so good at this, and I just chuckle because I say, I'm so good at this because I'm good at getting out of the way. I'm good at
Right.
stepping aside and
Yes.
allowing this energy to
Yeah.
flow. I don't try to control it. I don't tell it what to do whatsoever.
So we know, and people that practice Reiki know that this is something that we have no control over. And when we think we do, we're just wrong and we just don't know that we're wrong. And then science, I don't know if science can really pinpoint Reiki, but certainly we have the ability to detect the human energy field. That's just something that we've been able to do. I don't know if they wrote this before this existed, or if they just didn't do in-depth research enough to know that the human energy field has been detected. So those are the main things. Those were the reasons why it was. And at the end of that letter from the bishops, it was, I felt as a Catholic, a past Catholic, I guess.
Always a Catholic.
Yes,
Once a Catholic, always a Catholic. Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
I felt like it was like a dire warning at the end that if you practice Reiki, you're not in good standing with the church.
Gosh. And I do understand that upset quite a few nuns who were actually using Reiki in their hospitals, because one thing that I've been so impressed with the Catholic Church about is that they created so many hospitals that were open to everyone from every
Yes.
denomination, and a lot of the nuns had created these hospitals, the schools, and I understood that the nuns were upset that because they had been using Reiki successfully in the hospitals. So my understanding was the nuns just changed the name and kept
Yes,
using it.
yes, that's right. I do remember hearing about that or reading about that somewhere. They changed the name and they just continued to do what they knew inside of them was the right thing to do. And
It
Reiki is
worked.
practiced in the medical community
Yes. As
more.
you are a scientist from the medical community. And so, yes.
Yeah, there's Raven Keys has the medical Reiki master, and they're putting Reiki masters into the OR.
Yeah.
And the medical community is very much accepting of this. Maybe that letter needs to be updated, I would say.
Revised or, yeah,
Mhm.
I think so. And I felt really bad for the girl in the class that I was talking about earlier because her father was not accepting of her Reiki journey, and it hurt her. It hurt
Mm.
her a lot that this was where and I can't help but think that sometimes our background in religion brings us to Reiki as a way to deepen, as it did for you, as a way to deepen your practice or your understanding. And I did feel so bad for that young girl whose father did point out that letter and say, look, you're not, he was very not accepting
Mm.
of Reiki. And it's a shame, isn't it?
It is. It really is. I would say that to just let that, like I was saying earlier, let that process happen naturally.
Yeah.
And Reiki, and even the essence of the Catholic religion, the true essence of it, it will happen naturally. I think that the two can merge
Yeah.
and find a unity together. And I don't think it matters like what the person's thoughts are at any given time, because we both know that anybody can change their thought process. And it is the practice of Reiki and this student of yours, her own practice of Reiki and just being who she is and not like engaging with her dad and just letting that process happen naturally. I think over time, and sometimes I think it takes a really long time. And I'm sure that there are times when it just doesn't happen because the person is just not ready to heal that part of themselves that is looking at Reiki like it's something bad. But in my own experience, it's just been letting that happen. And I didn't do this on purpose. I didn't say, oh, I'm just going to let this happen naturally. I just let it happen naturally. And looking back at it, that was the correct thing for me to do in my life and for my mom too, because it really changed both of our ways, my way of looking at the religion, the Catholic religion, and her way of looking at spirituality in general.
Wow.
And that helped her so much in the last years of her life. And especially like when she was in the hospital, the last days, weeks of her life were spent with me giving her Reiki and her receiving so much comfort from it. And I think releasing a lot of grief and maybe guilt that inherently, I think, is you just don't realize that you're taking in when you're in sometimes in the Catholic religion because of all the rules and stuff. And I think my mom, being from the generation she was from, had a lot of guilt about different things, like she was divorced and you're supposed to, till it's not like something that the Catholic religion, they frown upon. My mother had these things that had happened in her life that really, I think, gave her a lot of guilt. So she ended up dying because of her kidneys failed. And I always thought that, and she never had any kidney problem prior to that. So I always felt it was like all those years, like 83 years of this grief or fear
Yeah.
that she held within her, in her cells. And I think that affected her kidneys.
Yeah.
But what happened at the end, Pam, was I feel like she was able to heal herself because she had this, I'm going off on a little tangent
It's
here.
great.
Oh, okay.
This is great.
um, so my mom, at the end of her life, she had this condition where your urine turns purple, and it's very rare, and
Wow.
it's
Yeah. No,
not
never
a
heard
good
of it.
sign. It's like
Okay.
an ominous sign. So her urine turned purple. So of course her lab work was all off the chart. So of course I was giving her Reiki, like focusing on her kidneys day after day. And after a few days, her urine started to turn yellow again. And her lab work was good. And I thought, oh, she's turned the corner. She's getting better. And do you know that it wasn't like 2 or 3 days later that my mom passed away? And
Wow.
what I believe is that she was able to release this fear, this grief, or this guilt that she carried with her for her whole life. And that urine clearing up for me was a sign in hindsight that she was able to do that and pass over in a more peaceful way. And in the conversations that I had with my mother, like on when she was in the hospital, led me to believe this too. Like she
Right.
told me that she didn't realize how her whole life she just had this nervousness or like anxiety or whatever. And you would have never known it with my mother. She was like the life of the party. She was so funny, and she talked a lot, and her laugh was real loud. So I didn't know that she felt that way. So I was, in my mind, putting two and two together, and my knowledge of the way that Reiki can work, and knowing like how a person could hold in all like guilt and feeling like they did something wrong for so many years and not even really be conscious of it. We know that can affect our physical body. So I think she was able to, because of the practice of Reiki, she allowed it into her life at the time that she did. I think she was able to really come to terms with and understand that even if the actual teachings in the Catholic Church at one time, in her opinion, were like scary or whatever, and made her feel like she was guilty, I think she came to the understanding that the essence of what the Catholic Church is, and if we think it goes back to like Jesus and the apostles, the essence of that is nothing that is going to want a person to feel guilty
Right.
or afraid or anything like that. For a very devout Catholic person that she was for her whole 83 years of her life, those last three or however many years, she really made such a transition that was really such a learning experience for me and a beautiful thing for me to be able to witness as being her daughter and being somebody that was very close to her. I'm just so like feel so honored that I was the one that introduced Reiki to her and that we had that connection. So
That's beautiful, Tracy. What a beautiful, and I'm picturing you having the ability to do Reiki for this wonderful, obviously very strong and very devout woman. I'm just picturing the two of you sharing that at the end, and what an absolutely beautiful experience that must have been.
it was. I'm just very, of course, I was like devastated. And I'm so like grateful to be able to look back on that and see, even all the way back to that experience I had like in midnight mass. I had just the whole thing is I just feel so grateful to have had this recognition of that deep essence of love that is there
Yeah.
in that religion, even though there's so many like bad things that may surround it. And that's something that I always try to remember for the people that are still like really devout Catholics. And when all this stuff started happening with priests, and it started happening a long time ago, when it came to light, I just felt so bad for the people that were like devout Catholics because they still were, yet they had this thing that was bad that's been impacting their whole belief system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt bad for my mother when all that started happening. And I actually, talking about religious trauma, I never experienced any myself, but one of our relatives in my family did experience religious trauma with one of the priests in the
Oh
church.
dear.
Yeah, so for my mom, it was like a pretty devastating. Like, how do you keep your faith and experience this? It's like a real lesson in what is the essence of this. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do with the human beings involved. It is all about the energy, as I guess we would describe it, or God or Jesus, as somebody in the Catholic religion would describe it.
And it is difficult, and I have to admit that one of the things I always, with my husband being Catholic and my in-laws, and I always pay attention to the Catholicism, the Catholic religion, the Pope. I've always been fascinated by it. And the Pope now is so impressive because there are some pretty awful things that have happened in the history of the religion. And I think there's probably awful things that happen in the history of every religion, no matter what it is. No religion is perfect, no person is perfect. And one of the things we talk about, first heaven, second heaven, third heaven, here on the first heaven where we live, there are always people who are trying to help others and people that are trying to take advantage. And those
Mm-hmm.
are going to exist within any
Right.
system, within anything. But one of the things that within the Catholic and Protestant religions, that within the Christian religions, that is hard to take. There's a few things that are hard to take, but one of them is the residential school systems that have existed here in Canada, and I believe they existed in the United States as well
Oh,
to a
yeah.
certain extent, with where Native American children were taken from their families and
Mm-hmm.
brought to places where, and they weren't always treated very well at all. And so a group of native elders from Canada went to Rome and asked for an audience with the Pope. And not only did he give them an audience, but they were supposed to be there a set length of time, and he spent much longer. And not
Oh,
only did the Pope apologize to them and say that, look, that was wrong, but he is now planning a trip to Canada, and he will
wow.
be here and meet with the elders from various tribes and with a formal apology. And I don't know,
That's big.
I think it is. I think it's impressive. And I know that the Catholic Church has been ravaged because of some of these things that are coming to light that were not
Mhm.
right and that are now just coming to light. And but I like what you say just about the essence of it, because there are always going to be people that interpret things in a way that work for them, or
Mhm.
interpret things in a way that isn't healthy. And I
Right.
think there's religious trauma. You talked about that type of religious trauma, but I think that most people have experienced some form of religious trauma, regardless of their religion. Just whenever they come across things that are not in accordance with them and with source and with spirit,
Mhm.
and we're going to come across these within. People are fallible, and even within Reiki, we're not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Goodness knows we're not all perfect, and so we can't expect our religious leaders to all be perfect either. And so I feel I talk about religious trauma, and it's comical. My religious trauma is because I could always hear God, and the God that I heard was very kind. And I remember once overhearing some people that were counting the collection for my church, and they said, "We've got to get rid of this minister. He's talking about love and kindness, and it just doesn't fill the collection plate enough. We need somebody to talk about fear and damnation.
Oh
That
my
fills
gosh.
the election. That fills the collection plate more." And and so this is the source of my religious trauma. I was hearing this. I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" And like, what? That's
Oh
how it
boy.
works. I was just a kid, and. And so I find it comical. My religious trauma is something like this when other people, especially our Native American friends and people who experienced abuse and things like that, they have some really deep seated religious trauma. But
Mhm.
what that does, though, is that actually brings me to wrapping up and our prayer, because I actually
Mhm.
wanted to lead us on a prayer today
Nice.
that just goes into religious trauma. And sometimes it can be you may have trauma because you're a Reiki practitioner, but somebody in your life might not accept that because of their religious backgrounds or understandings, and that can create difficulty or trauma within you. So I really had wanted to lead us in a prayer that helps release some of that. Before we do, though, Tracey, is there anything else that we haven't covered? I loved our talk
Me too. Thanks,
about
Diane.
this. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say about Catholicism before we go into
Mm,
our final prayer?
I guess just to reiterate, to like when you come across somebody that is very devout, Catholic or devout in a religion, to just to remember to feel that compassion for them for what they might be going through as far as all like the negative impacts that are on these religions nowadays. That's one thing that I would just reiterate, to have compassion for these people, because a lot of times I've noticed people are like, how can you practice that? And the person is already probably feeling some guilt about what other people in the religion did. Yeah, that would be the only thing.
Or some
Um,
internal struggles and some religious trauma of their own. And yeah, so just remembering that all roads lead home. The road we've chosen is Reiki, and
mhm.
yet other people may choose a completely different road, and we're still going to wind up at that stadium.
That's right.
We're going to
That's
get
right.
there no matter
We
what
can
our
stop
path.
at all the houses on the way and invite everybody along.
I love that. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank
I'm just
you.
going to invite everybody today to once more close your eyes as we go into our final prayer to release religious trauma from you and anything that you may have experienced in your life. And because it is very rare to find somebody who hasn't experienced some form of religious trauma. So I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and bring your hands into Gasho. Once again, just activating your Reiki energy, connecting with your symbols, and then place your hands comfortably on your body wherever you feel guided, and breathe. And today we just acknowledge all of the different forms of connection with Source, with God, the Divine Being, Allah, Jehovah, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, life force energy, universal energy, whatever name that you use, we acknowledge and respect that we are all the same, unified in our purpose of going home to Source, the source of all that is. And I believe it's possible to go home to Source while still living in this lifetime and on this planet. To come from a beautiful place, and there are so many ways to get there, and we honor that. And we honor and respect people from all walks of life, from all religions, all cultures, all preferences. And I invite you to just ask yourself for a moment if you have ever experienced any religious trauma or any discord as a part of your spiritual or religious upbringing. And if you have, where it might exist in your body. It's usually the first place that comes to your mind when I ask that question. And just ask yourself, if this religious trauma that exists within me had a shape, what shape would it have? And what color would it be? And does it leave me with a feeling of heaviness or guilt or shame or blame or grief or any of these other dense and heavy emotions? And finally, ask yourself today if you're ready to let go of this trauma that exists within most of us and that may be affecting you. And I invite you to imagine that it's a beautiful, warm, sunny day and that you're walking through a trail in a beautiful forest. As you walk along and you breathe into yourself, you breathe in the life essence of the forest. And the energy of the earth flows up through the bottoms of your feet. And today we will go into a spiritual baptism to release all of this trauma, guilt, grief, shame, blame, anything at all that troubles you or has troubled you in the past as a result of your religious or spiritual experiences, any feelings of non-acceptance, not belonging, any of that. And so you walk in the forest until you come to the edge of the forest, and in front of you is a beautiful river. This is the river of peace. I invite you to walk down to the river, and if you're guided, you may cup your hands and take a drink of the beautiful life-giving waters. These waters flow from the highest mountains in the highest spiritual heavens. And they are completely pure, life-affirming, beautiful. I invite you to step into the waters and lie down, and as you do, just feel the water holding you. You're being held in the arms of the earth, and at the same time, a beautiful beam of light appears from the highest heavens, and it shines down upon you and all around you. I invite you to stay here and to just release this burden. And some of you may notice that it's dissolving into the waters. Some of you may notice parts of it lifting into the heavens. Whatever it does, I invite you today to just let it go, and we'll remain here for a few moments. And the energies of peace and grace move in to fill the void that is left behind. grace flows through you in the light of acceptance and unification as you realize that we are all one. We are all working to connect with Source in our own way. Whatever way that may be, it's the way that's right for each and every one of us, and so we accept all others that we meet on the path, regardless of how they are working to get there. And I'd like to invite you to stay in this space as long as you feel guided and as long as you need. And when you are ready, you may choose to return. I'd like to thank you all and to thank Tracey for telling us about Catholicism, and to thank you all for just releasing that trauma that may exist for you and for being open to accepting the perceptions and perspectives and opinions and experiences of others. Many blessings as you go forward into this week. Amen and namaste. Thank you, Tracey.